بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن والاه ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي اللهم صل وسلم وأنعم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن اتبع سنته إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. So the title is a bit deceiving. The topic of tonight is based on the book, which I should have bought, I don't know why, but it's based on the book that looks very similar to this, called The Obstacle is the Way, which is a book by a young man named Ryan Holiday, who is a 31-year-old entrepreneur who's written a few books. One is the best-selling, The Ego is the Way, and he's written a lot about Stoicism. And we'll get into a little bit that later, inshallah. And so Ryan Holiday has written this one book called The Obstacle is the Way. And this book, it talks about overcoming obstacles and things that people of the past have done to overcome these different obstacles. And when I first even heard about the book, let alone opened it up to read some of it, I realized that we have, as Muslims, in our worldview, the answers to everything. How to overcome obstacles, how to deal with difficult times. And so this got my mind started to think about what is the Islamic perspective of dealing with difficulties? What's the Islamic perspective of dealing with obstacles? And so that's the nature that we're trying to get into when we're talking about this book. And to start off, I want to say that as Muslim, or as a Muslim, when we use the title Islam is the Way, that is not belittling what Ryan Holiday mentions in the book. I think the book is very beneficial, and a lot of things can be extracted from it. Nor is that belittling another person's means of finding ways to deal with obstacles. Whether that's from a Christian perspective, a Jewish perspective, a spiritual, a humanist, it doesn't matter. There are multiple different perspectives of how to look at dealing with difficult times. But me as a religionist, as someone who is a Muslim, I believe that our tradition has the ability to help us through every difficult time, no matter what it may be. And I believe that adamantly. If I didn't believe that, then my religion was holistic and all-encompassing, then they would mean that I didn't really have something to stand on. And so again, this is the first disclaimer, that when we say Islam is the way and we're talking about this from an Islamic perspective, that's not belittling the book. The book is good. There are many things that we can benefit from. Nor is that saying that other ways aren't possible. No, there are other ways of dealing with difficult times. But according to me, in my opinion, Islam is the best way. And if we are to do it properly, then we can also not only deal with a difficult time, but we can get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that. So to start things off, what is an obstacle? What's the first thing that comes to mind when you think of an obstacle? Generally, an obstacle is something that comes in your way when you're trying to get somewhere else. Generally, an obstacle is something that inherently is difficult. You had a nice, easy path. There's work done on the road, so now you've got to make a detour. And so when we're thinking about obstacles and making the obstacle the way, we're talking about making the difficulties that we're having in life, the difficulties that we're going through, and turning the negative into a positive orientation, turning the negative into something that we can benefit from. And so, theologically, according to our aqidah, to our tradition, what we believe as Muslims, then there is something inherent, deeply rooted in that we can find that from. And just to start things off, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran, أحسب الناس أن يتركوا أن يقولوا آمنا وهم لا يفتنون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, do people think that they will say that they believe and not be tested? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us a part of us believing in Him subhanahu wa ta'ala, a part of us being Muslim with conviction and certainty, is that that same certainty, our religion, our theological belief, what we're thinking that we're adhering to, is going to be tested. That's a part of us being Muslim. And so, as we'll come into later, we need to just go ahead and embrace that difficulty. knowing that these things are from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But we'll get into that later. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, إِذَا أَرَادَ اللَّهُ بِعَبْدِهِ خَيْرًا عَجَّلَهُ لَهُ عُقُوبَتَهُ. That if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants goodness, and the actual word in the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says al-khair. And what is the article, meaning what is the best type of goodness? Al-firdaus. Or even better than that, the highest level of Jannah, or God's pleasure. But let's just look at it from a very subjective, our perspective, goodness in general. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if God Almighty wants goodness for us, then He hastens punishment, difficulty, hardship. But if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants evil, ashar, for His servants, then He delays the benefits of their good deeds until the Day of Judgment. So again, we said to begin that inherently a part of us being Muslim, a part of us being people who believe in the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the finality of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is that we're going to be tested. But then after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that this is a part of Allah wanting good for us, to delay our goodness until the next life, or to allow the difficulties to come now so that in the next life we have more good to take from. And the final hadith that we'll mention is where the Prophet ﷺ said, this is wallahi the sweetest thing in the world, to hear kids laugh. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless them, preserve them, and allow us to laugh like them so innocently and purely. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, عَجِبْتُ لِأَمْرِ الْمُؤْمِنِ إِنَّ أَمْرُهُ كُلُّهُ خَيْرٌ. The Prophet ﷺ says, I am amazed by the way or the status of a believer. Because, and the Prophet ﷺ here used the word believer. He said, I'm amazed by the amr, the condition of a believer, because all of it is good. He said, وَلَيْسَ ذَلِكَ إِلَّا لِلْمُؤْمِنِ. And that is not to anyone else other than a believer. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He says, if they're harmed, if they're afflicted with something that makes them happy, they're grateful, and then it is good for them. But if they're afflicted with something that displeases them, then they're patient, and then it is good for them. The Prophet ﷺ is telling us that as Muslims, we have a very specific way of looking at things. And inshallah, as believers, that how we can look at every situation, there is inherently a divine silver lining. There's inherently something built into that it enables us to connect with the divine. But how we do that in good times is gratitude, and how we deal with that in bad times is patience. But in both of those times, we're turning what looks and seems to be negative into a good situation. And as the Prophet ﷺ said, وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَهُ. And that is good for them. So let's get into the book a little bit. The overview of the book is, it draws on Stoicism, as we talked about before. And the Stoics, they believe that it's to focus things they can actually control on and to let go of everything else. And so this is the premise of the book. And I believe there are a lot of benefits, as I said before, in Stoicism. Again, but as a Muslim, if we take that Stoic methodology of practicing things and infuse it with our theology and our spirituality, then it enables us to accomplish great things. Because in Stoicism, we're just not going to pay attention. Something bad comes, I can't control it, so I'm not going to worry about it and focus on something else. But if we take this hadith of the Prophet ﷺ and actually remember the divine, remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then now we're actually getting ajr for it, opposed to something that we're just pushing aside. And so there's a video that describes Stoicism. It's like 5 minutes. I don't know if I can even play it from here. Can you hit the play button on the laptop, please? Yeah, jazakallah khair. It's like 5 minutes. If you're bored, I'll stop it. No, we didn't fix the sound. Lord have mercy. All right, so we're not going over the video Stoicism. You just go ahead and pause it. Yep. Yep. Jazakallah khair. Stoicism. See, bad thing, move. It's all good. Can you close it so I can just click to the next slide? Yep. I did not sound test. This is my fault. I didn't have time to sound check. Oh, we're good. Just make it full screen for me. Bam. just hit present in the top left, right corner. Not left, right, right. Present. Yep. Jazakallah khair. Bam. So these are the three main topics of the book. It talks about, these are three main sections of the book. And these are all the chapters that I've just laid out. And I've highlighted a couple ones that are particularly beneficial. So it goes over perception, then action, and then will. Perception being how we see something. The first thing that comes to our mind, we're afflicted with an obstacle. Again, we're talking about obstacles. When we have the obstacle come, how we perceive the obstacle, what we do with it, how we feel when the obstacle comes. And then preparing for the next part, which is going to be actions. And then once the action comes, what do we do with the action? How do we make the action something good? How do we change the negative situations? The last part is will. And that's afterwards. How do you persevere? How do you maintain it? Etc., etc. Now, the Islamic perspective, this again is all my conjecture. Please feel free to push back, and I'd love to have a discussion about it, is to look at it from the Hadith Jibril. We have theology, how we perceive everything, how we filter everything as a Muslim is through a theological lens. Or that's what we're hoping to try to get to. And this is basically just very, very basic, Allah and His Prophet. Yes, there are many, many articles of faith, but if we're going to bring it down to everything very, very small, it's God and the Prophet ﷺ. And so from theology, then we have jurisprudence, fiqh. So from aqidah, then we can have fiqh. And fiqh has different categories. Again, we'll get into that a little bit, inshallah. What is obligatory for us to do? What is recommended for us to do? What is permissible? What is disliked? And what is impermissible? So from our theological perspective, what we think about things, then we'll understand how to apply actual actions. And is the action good for us? Is it bad for us? Should we do it? Should we not do it? After that, following the order with Hadith Jibril, we have spirituality. How we then take what we believe and the actions that we're doing and enhance them, make them better. And Imam al-Ghazali said, the aim of moral discipline is to purify the heart from the rust of passion and resentment, till, like a clear mirror, it reflects the light of God. The goal of all of this is to remove our nafs, to remove our nufus, to remove those things that inherently impede us from getting close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I know right now I should be praying. It's time to pray. But I'm doing something else that has distracted me. Therefore, I'm now in confliction. Do I do the thing that I like to do, or do I pray? Very, very basic example. The Super Bowl's on. We're with our friends. We're shopping. We are building something. Whatever it may be. I'm in this. I remember Salah. Again, if you don't remember, that's very different. I remember the Salah. And do I stop whatever I'm doing to continue on and do what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Those all desires. The goal is to remove that where it's not even a thought process. Allah wants us to do it, we're going to do it. But again, that's spirituality, that's the highest level. So let's just go straight into theology. And this is the biggest part that we have to focus on. Because from this is where everything else comes. And obviously we have to start with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And these are different attributes, different characteristics or qualities rather, of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we absolutely have to believe in. Yes, there are 99. There are many, many more. But these, we absolutely have to believe in them. And from that, when difficult times come, it will orient how we think about things. And I'm so sorry we didn't turn the TV over there for y'all to chill in the corner. The first, existence. We believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists. We believe we are theocentric people. We believe that a God exists. Excuse me, and we acknowledge that. We have to. Because if we don't, then everything else is without purpose. It doesn't really matter. And a prime example for that are how many people die of suicide that have wealth. How many people are unhappy with their lives, though they have infinite amount of things. And you'll meet people, inshallah, in your life that have endless amounts of money, enough that they can live the rest of their life off what they have, or enough where they can continue living a life where they don't have to worry about anything. They want to drive, hire a driver. Don't want to cook, hire a chef. Don't want to buy the food, pay someone else to do that. All these things can be mitigated for them. But if they don't have a purpose, you don't even believe the fact there's a God that we need to worship, then nothing else really has purpose. And then for us, secondly, is we believe in the oneness, the wahdaniyya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because if we don't believe in the oneness of, in every religion, every tradition, historically, has been proven to go back to the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Arabs before Islam, they believed in Allah, though they were polytheists. They believed in the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but they thought they had to go through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through these idols to get to Allah. But for us as Muslims, we know that there's a supreme being, a divine God, who's most gracious and most merciful, who overpowers and oversees everything that happens, that would happen, that could have happened if he wanted to happen, so, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And having a knowledge of that, but not just having a knowledge, having a belief of that, knowing that with conviction or believing that with conviction. When a difficult time comes, you know that that's where we're going to find success. Excuse me. It's not really the other things. When we're sick, we take Tylenol. Or we take, I'm thinking of Arab medicine right now for some odd reason. I can't get it out of my mind. But I was going to say Flu-Tab and Panadol. Anyways, when you get sick, you take different Dayquil, NyQuil. It's coming back now, alhamdulillah. You take different medicines to get over that sickness. You have a headache, you take the pill. What's actually helping us? Is it the Aleve gel capsule that's like super dosage or whatever that I take it and alhamdulillah I feel better? Or is it Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowing that to actually make us feel better? We know this Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But by us believing in that and having that mindfulness, that state of mind, that changes things now for us. That everything that happens, we look at it the same way we do as medicine. It is only a wasata. It is only a mediary or intermediary, to allowing us. It's only through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's permission that we can have anything. The third and the fourth is that He has existed always and will continue to exist forever. Our God is not a God that we can destroy. Our God is not a God that is temporal. We have a God that is always going to exist. Excuse me. And in believing in an everlasting God, a God that is not only everlasting but always existed, we understand that He has more knowledge than us, subhanahu wa ta'ala. We understand that His power is much stronger than ours. We understand that no matter what or how things look, He's always going to be there. He's always, subhanahu wa ta'ala, God is always going to be there. Now, the fifth and the sixth, He doesn't need us, nor does He resemble anything from creation, subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have a God, we believe in a divine being that not only doesn't need us, He doesn't resemble us. لا يأخذه سنة ولا نوم. He does not feel tiredness, nor does He sleep, subhanahu wa ta'ala. He doesn't need us to help Him. And just from a worldly perspective, if you have someone who doesn't need you, they're absolved of all these things that you need, then it makes it easier for you to rely on them. Our parents is a prime example. Growing up, they don't need us, in quotes, they need us emotionally, etc. But realistically, we're not, as children, bringing something tangible to their lives. Again, there's emotions, there's happiness, there's all that good stuff. So they don't need to rely on us. We rely on them and we feel comfortable relying on them because they have what we need. We need some food, we live at home. Mama, did you make dinner? You need some money? Can I have some money? So whether or not we're still in that situation, we know or remember being once in that place. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah exalted upon all examples, doesn't need us, nor does He resemble us. He's not anything like us. We get sick, we get tired, we have physical carnal needs, we have different distractions. It's hard enough for us to multitask. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is nothing similar to us. So His knowledge and His power enables Him to serve everyone completely without any deficiency in anyone. We have to believe these things about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He has the power and the will to do anything and everything that He wanted to do. Wanted and wants to do. So again, when we're faced with obstacles, We have an all-powerful God. We have to believe that. If we don't believe it, then we need to study and make sure we're increasing ourselves in knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that when we are tested, when we are afflicted with things, we can turn back here. He has the knowledge of everything that happened previously, everything that's happening now, everything that's going to happen, subhanahu wa ta'ala, and everything that would happen if He wanted to happen. And so if we believe that about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that nothing escapes divine knowledge, then we're not fooling anyone, nor are we alone in whatever we're going through. No matter how difficult it may be, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has control over that situation. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that this is good for us right now. There is inherently in this something for us to take. Going back to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. After that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-hayy. We don't have a God that's dead. We don't have a God that's sleeping. Our God is a God that is alive. And so why does life even matter? Because if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is alive, He's not sleeping, subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's not dead, subhanahu wa ta'ala. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, these are deficiencies, one, that we have. When we're sleeping, we're not cognizant of what's going on. And if we're tired, we're unable to act with full vigor that we once had. Our cognitive functioning dwindles. Our life also ends. In the beginning of life, we don't have as much power, energy, and intelligence as we do in the middle of our lives. And when we get closer to the end of our lives, again, it dwindles once again. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is alive with full power and will and able to do everything. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the all-hearing and the all-seeing. The all-hearing, nothing that anyone said to us, nothing that is going on escapes His knowledge. And again, going back to the principle number 6, that there's nothing like our creation. Yeah, I saw your flash, by the way. I just want to make you feel bad. Like going back to principle number 6, He's not like us, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we think about hearing, as one of my teachers said, when we think about hearing, our hearing is limited to sounds. Our hearing is restricted to things that go into an ear canal. Our eardrum processes it, it goes to our brain, and we then understand what's going on. Allah is exalted upon all of these things. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can hear feelings. He can hear what's going on in our hearts, what's really happening. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can hear touch in ways that we can't. Obviously, we can't understand these things. Our senses, our faculties are restricted into how we can. But when we're thinking about God, again, it's beyond us. He's all-seeing. He sees the oppression, the hardship that we're going through. He sees what we're feeling. He sees our efforts. He sees what we're trying to accomplish. So again, when we're thinking about the obstacle is the way, when we're thinking about going through difficulties and hardships, we have to go back to these things. And the last is we have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks. And His speech is unlike ours in any way, shape, form, or fashion. But the biggest example for us as Muslims is the Quran, Kalamullah, the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so we can turn back to it to find all examples. And when we're thinking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaking, we have to think, who did He speak to? Who did He subhanahu wa ta'ala teach? And that goes into our next point, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We have in the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam the best of examples. We have someone who was the complete person, who was infallible as a person, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And these 4 principles aren't the only characteristics of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I just thought of a couple that aligned with the book a little bit. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was confident in who he was, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but also very sincere in his confidence. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that he was the best of creation, wala fakhr, but I'm not being arrogant about it. This is just a fact. He was confident in who he was. But that confidence also was extremely sincere. So knowing that he was infallible, knowing that he was already guaranteed Jannah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he prayed all night long. And when Aisha radiallahu anha asked him, why are you praying so much? He said, أَفَلَا أَكُونَ عَبْدًا شَكُورًا. Should I not be a thankful servant? This is how the lens through which the Prophet ﷺ looked at himself. Knowing that he was promised Jannah, that he was infallible. He was confident in that. But that confidence was only a means of increasing him in sincerity, increasing him in doing good, and finding ways to go around difficulty. When the Battle of Badr was happening, before the Battle of Badr, after they have figured out what is going to happen, where the Muslims are going to be, how they're going to engage in this war, the Prophet ﷺ raised his hands in supplication, calling upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so intensely, so passionately, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, raising his hands so high that his cloak fell off his shoulders. And it was so impassioned that Abu Bakr came and put his hand on his shoulder, like, it's going to be all right. It's okay. This is how the Prophet ﷺ was. Confident that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was going to help them, but also sincere in knowing that he was deficient and needing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we're faced with difficult times, we have to know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows exactly what's going on. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed for us to be going through this difficult time. Though we have our own involvement, our own actions led us to this. We chose to do that which led to that. But our free will is very, very limited, as Imam Ghazali mentions. Our free will is extremely limited. I have choices between A and B. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's will is infinite. He doesn't have A, B, subhanahu wa ta'ala. He can make A, Z, and D, B, or 1, 2, and 3. This clicker can turn into a lion, it can turn into a cat. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, kun fayakun, and it is. So when we're going through difficult times, that's what we have to be mindful of. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who decreed for this, and he's also the one through the only way that we'll find help and ability to get through it. The second is he was rahmatil lil alameen. He was the most merciful, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned about him in the Quran, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. We have not sent you except as a mercy to all of mankind. And so when we're thinking about the Prophet ﷺ being merciful, we also have to understand that what his perspective was, what his worldview and what he thought about everything. Everything was from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And through that lens, understanding that the Prophet ﷺ was merciful, and understanding also that his mercy was only an iota in comparison to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then there's some goodness is going to come out of this. His perspective was one of full trust and conviction and certainty in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but knowing that we can get out of this. So for us as Muslims, we can also embody these things. When we're afflicted with something, how do we react to it? Are we people that embody a prophetic character of mercy? Are we people that embody a spirit of wanting for our brother what we want, or our sister what we want for ourselves? Do we embody these ethos and we look at things through that prophetic lens, or do we deal with them in different ways? But also when thinking about mercy and thinking about the Prophet ﷺ, when we're thinking about difficult situations, we have to make sure that we're not being too hard on ourselves. Yes, it's very helpful to recollect and go over what has happened so that we can learn and benefit from it. But we have to make sure that we're not engaging in self-shame. We're not thinking about ourselves from a very negative perspective that then impedes us from doing good, that then inhibits our ability to grow as Muslims. No, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed us with how we look, how we're shaped, our complexions, our monetary, our social economic status, our gender, our sexual, all of this is from Allah. It was decreed for us before we were created. And if we believe that He is the all-knowledgeable, the all-wise, the most powerful, He subhanahu wa ta'ala is nothing similar to us, then we have to change how we're thinking about what's going on and be merciful to ourselves. I shouldn't feel bad for me being black, for example. I shouldn't feel bad for me being poor, for example. I'm not really poor, but in comparison to other people, I'm not rich. I shouldn't feel bad about these things. I now have to take this situation and figure out how to make the best out of it. Do I have the ability to look at it and say, okay, well, how do I change this And do I give up some sleep so I can work harder? For the college students, right now we're in finals. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make all of it easy for you. I know I got a paper due next Friday. What do? Do we forego sleep the last 2 months of our life in that semester? We get from like 10 to 8 down to like 5 and 4. Eat a little bit. Distance ourselves from our families. But how do we look at that? This is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm thinking, and this goes into our next point of perseverance. The Prophet ﷺ was persevering in how he looked at everything. That probably should say perseverance, but I don't know why I put persevering up there. My bad. The Prophet ﷺ was always perseverance. He had a long-term goals and long-term thinking about everything. What was the Prophet ﷺ making dua for when he was standing on the Battle of Badr? When he was standing on Badr, he wasn't thinking about himself, ﷺ. He was thinking about the ummah. The fact that if they were to be killed, then nothing would remain from Islam. Before he died, ﷺ, of the last words he said was, ummati, ummati. On his deathbed, ﷺ, he was thinking about us today. He had long-term goals. And so when we're faced with difficulty, how do we react? And how do we think about this long-term? Because this thing is right now. But we have, insha'Allah ta'ala, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless all of us with long, healthy lives, a lifetime ahead of us. And so what we do with what's going on right now is directly going to correlate with what happens in the future. What we do with this. So we have to change our perspective, which unfortunately, socially, we're geared to today, of thinking about things on a very short-term perspective, to now make things as what's going to happen long-term. How is this going to affect me in the future? How is this going to affect larger than me? Getting out of my narcissistic bubble and start to think collectivistically about my community, about my family, about my offspring, about my future. What am I going to forego now so that the future becomes easy? That's how I make the obstacle the way. This is something that I'm going through. How do we make the best of it? We're for the students now. Why did you even get in school? Why didn't you just get a job at your everyday restaurant, talk to an uncle in the community, hooks you up with something, and then you have a job? We chose to enroll in school so that the hopes that we'll have a better future. But that didn't come without difficulty. So why do we persevere through the difficulty that we're in now? It's because we have a long-term goal. But we can't just think about graduation. We can't just think, I went to school, alhamdulillah, I graduated, I'm straight. Because the statistics prove that that's not reality. We have to then think long-term. What am I going to do once I graduate? What connections am I making now so that things will grow and be better in the future? This is a long-term, not short-term. And the biggest thing that we can think about on a long-term perspective is our death. The fact that we are going to die and be questioned about everything that we do. So when an obstacle does come, what do we do with it? How do I turn this obstacle into something that gets me and gains me closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Because that's the goal at the end of the day. How do I take this thing and make it into something that's good? When we are tired and sleepy and our parents ask us to do something, and the first thing that comes to our mind is, oh my goodness, you just saw me go to bed. You just saw me get in my room. I said good night. But how do we then turn that into, Allah said, وَلَا تَكُنْ أُفٍّ لَهُمْ. Don't even say uff to them. All right, come on. Yes, with a smile. How can I? Not a passive-aggressive smile either. Not, a sarcastic smile. Sincerely, what can I do? And for those who are single in the room, that same spirit carries on once you get married. Because your partner is going to ask things of you. But do we have a long-term goal in mind? That we're going to, inshallah, live for the rest of our lives? I'm like, oh, hey, you on your own. I'm not helping you. These things, again, what we do now affects our future. Excuse me. It'll change how we interact with people in the future. It affects us how we process information. It affects everything. So to continue, the Prophet ﷺ was prepared. He had internal theological preparation and understanding in what he wanted. He knew what his goal was, and was ready for the task. He knew, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what he was trying to achieve, and he was ready to do whatever it required to achieve that task. But also, in being prepared, he was content in what he had. So like the companions, many of which we just, we forgo that thought. We think about the poor companions. We love to talk about the poor companions. They were broke, they had no money, they traveled on foot, they died in the path, they, tied rocks or something. We forget about the fact that some of them were also very, very wealthy. Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, when the Battle of Tabuk came, he left all of his wealth. Now let's think about that for a second. Yes, spiritually, he had to be very content in what he had and the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was going to provide for him. But also, he knew that he had the ability to go make more money. Established business person. Umar was able to give half of his wealth. But how they looked at that, not only were they prepared to give it, but how they looked at that was, what I have right now is what did the Prophet ﷺ say? Abu Bakr, what did you leave for your family? He said, Allah and His Messenger. That was enough for him. And the true definition of asceticism is not that we do not have anything. It's not that we live in shacks, we drive lemons, and we're just dealing with the bare minimum. No. Asceticism is that those things aren't in our hearts. So that doesn't mean if we see someone driving a new Mercedes-Benz or they have the finest clothes on, that they're inherently arrogant. No, they could be the most sincere, content, ascetic person possible. But what matters is how they think about those things. And so we have to be content in the things that we have. So that when obstacles do come, it's okay. We're out, my scarf tears. It's all right, alhamdulillah, I got another one at home. Or alhamdulillah, I'm okay not having one. I can wait until maybe I may have to wait 2 or 3 pay periods. That may just be a reality. I'm going to have to eat ramen noodles for a little bit so that I can save up to buy another one perhaps. But we're prepared and content in what's going on. Excuse me. And so this is how we have to think about things from the light of the Prophet ﷺ and what we're doing. So we talked about theology. The next short part we're going to talk about is jurisprudence, fiqh. And when we think about fiqh, I know in the beginning I talked about the 5 categories, but I think this hadith sums up really all we need to know about fiqh and with regards to what we do. In al-halalu bayyin wal-haramu bayyin. The halal is clear and the haram is clear. وَبَيْنَهُمَا أُمُورٌ مُشْتَبِهَاتٌ لَا يَعْلَمُهُنَّ كَثِيرٌ مِنَ النَّاسِ. In between that are doubtful matters that most people don't know. So whoever falls into doubtful matters has fallen into haram. Whoever has fallen into doubtful matters has fallen into haram. It's that simple. We know, as people who are at the masjid on a Friday night, basically what we need to do. We need to pray, we need to fast, we need to give sadaqah if we can, but we definitely need to pay our zakah, make hajj if we're able to. We need to be people who are thinking of La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. We know this. So we need to make sure we're doing it. And we also know the bare minimum that we need to be abstaining from: alcohol, fornication. These things, they're very, eating pork. We like to think about pork, we forget about everything else. We know what we should not be doing. The halal is clear and the haram is clear. And this lecture is not about telling you what you shouldn't be doing or you should be doing. It's about the fact that we know as Muslims what we need to be doing. And so if we do know what we're supposed to be doing, when difficulty does come, this is the rubric and how we know how to apply it. When something happens, we know Allah. We've already theologically framed ourselves. We've prepared our perspective on how to look at what happens. So we're ready for whatever does happen. But now we're placed in a situation, how do we now react to it? Someone offers you some money that you know is haram money. Or they say, listen man, just put your money in this. It's going to grow in this pyramid scheme and you're going to be rich. It's an interest-based loan. You do these things and you're going to be set. That's when this comes in, jurisprudence comes into play. Is this permissible for me to do? Is this something that is doubtful for me? If it is, that's when we go back to our perspective of things, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to take care of us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what's best for us. And this is merely a test. That's when this jurisprudence comes into play. But then, what do we do with this? The last part, which is most important, spirituality. Not most important, but very integral to the entire thing. Because spirituality is now what brings together the theological and the jurisprudence. What brings together what we believe on the inside and how we act on the outside. And makes all of those things aligned with what is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so that is what Imam Ghazali is talking about here. The aim of moral discipline, not physical, moral, or how we think about things good or bad, about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The aim of moral discipline is to purify the heart, to condition, to remove the gunk, to purify the heart from the rust of passions. Look how Imam Ghazali even thinks about this. To purify the heart from the rust. Rust is something we don't want on metal, that we want to get away from it. It weakens it. It weakens the metal. You get rust in your car, you can punch a hole through it. So the rust on our hearts, the sin of passion and desires and sin and transgression, weaken our heart from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And resentment, until like a clean mirror, because we want to clean our hearts. So until like a clean mirror, it reflects the light of God. So that everything that we're doing reflects Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and what He wants of us. Reflects the light of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and how he carried out his life. This is what we're trying to do with these things. And like a mirror in a bathroom after you took a shower, it fogs up real quick. You can't leave it for a second. You're constantly working at it. You're constantly trying to remove it. But when something does get on that, you try to remove it. We repent. We try to get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but then we go back again. We keep working it. This cycle of refining ourselves and spiritual purification is ibadah in and of itself. This is what Allah wants from us. So when we're hit with difficult times, first we think about Allah, how we process things theologically. Then the Prophet ﷺ, how he acted about things, how he lived his life. Then, is this thing even permissible for me to do? Then how do I look at this? Is this going to get me close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? The goal is that our actions become fine-tuned. It's like a well-oiled machine, where our thought process isn't even one that has to take time to think about this. Do I pray? I hear the adhan app on my phone. I know how much time happens. If I'm in the middle of class or at work, it doesn't matter. I'm going to go take a 5-minute bathroom break, find a corner or alleyway or the chapel to pray. It's not a thought process. It's just something that happens. I know before the semester, listen, full disclosure, I didn't realize time was going to change and Maghrib was going to come in if you have a night class. It was going to mess things up a little bit. But we think about these things, that when it does come and teach, listen, professor, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to pause for a minute if we're not going to take a break so I can pray. We think about these things. So it becomes like a well-oiled machine. It just happens. We're not thinking about it. But also when difficulty happens, when we're invited to something that we know we shouldn't be doing, when we're engaging in something and a topic comes up that's not good for us, when we're listening to something, music or otherwise. We already had to talk about that. We already answered music. I'm not even going to get into it. But let's say, for the sake of argument, you're listening to music. What is it doing to your heart? How does it make you feel? Do you feel impassioned to do something haram? Or do you feel impassioned to do something good? Does it make you feel good? Is it a form of therapy that's going to make you think about Allah, think about the goodness of your family, think about how you're going to overcome this difficult day? Or is it something that makes you think about being grimy, drugs, alcohol, zina, or those type of things? And if we're not thinking about it in that lens, then that is inherently when music becomes unequivocally impermissible. If music then is not something, you're not listening to Bill Withers, it's going to be a lovely day, and it's making your day feel good. You know, ain't no sunshine, it's all good. It makes you feel happy, perseverance, it's helping you. You're not talking about that. We're talking about something very, very different. Popping bottles, the club, zina. That's a reality. And so we have to think, what we're listening to, how does it affect our hearts? Maybe it doesn't affect us now, but we're listening to it. It conditions our mind to be thinking about those things. What conversations are we having? How are we engaging in these conversations? What are we even thinking about? How do we look and process the world? And these are things that we're trying to, again, it's not something today I hit a switch, I'm super Muslim. I'm a muhsin, I'm a wali, I'm a saint, or a person that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves. Even them, they're tested. As one of my teachers mentioned. Even them, they have the same difficulties of life. A prime example of that is Umar ibn Khattab, who had marital discord. He had a problem with his spouse, but he was Umar, the second best person to ever walk the face of the earth after the prophets. Umar, the second Khalifa through which the vast majority of the Ummah expanded. Umar, the one who the Prophet ﷺ said that if there were to be a prophet after him, it would be Umar. This is Umar al-Khattab. Even he, who we can all agree Umar was special, had difficult times. He felt sad for what he had done before, for burying his daughter alive. Umar also had problems in his personal life. And again, I don't know any examples of, husbands. There is an example. A woman came to the Prophet ﷺ, asked him, should he marry one of three people? The Prophet ﷺ, don't marry that one. He beats women. Don't marry that one. He's incredibly cheap, but marry this one. So again, even personal lives, how do we process these things? And so with that, I close and open the floor to you all. If you have any questions, comments, critiques. Jazakumullah khair. Fine. No questions, comments, critiques. Beautiful. How can we as Muslims orient ourselves, practically speaking? I gave a lot of theoretical things. How can we change things that we're interacting with? How can we change our lives so that Islam is the way? So that Islam is what governs how we process things. Islam is what governs how we interact with people and the environment and society. This is a question. I'm not like that. Jazakallah khair. Yes, you can. Let's hope the batteries are good. Okay. My bad.
Assalamu alaikum. I guess it would be more of like paying attention to, can you kind of how you were mentioning, if you can plan your classes around prayer times, etc., doing something like that. So an example would be if you're at the mall, you're going with your friends, your parents, etc. It's Black Friday, you're shopping, all this kind of stuff. Like keeping in mind when the prayer times are coming in, so then you can even kind of go before or after Maghrib, or if you're going to the gym, etc. Make sure that you don't get caught in that time period where you literally have nowhere to pray. Or even if you do, then finding even something as simple as like a fitting room. Take a shirt that you might find interesting, put on the floor, pray very quickly. Who knows, liking the shirt and end up buying it. So just keeping, kind of embedding Islam more into your life than it being a one-off, separate thing that you only do when obstacles come your way.
Absolutely. Sheikh Yasser mentioned that last month when we had the beginning of guidance class. I think it was then. He said that there are little musallas all over the world, all over America right now. Every mall has a bunch of little musallas at every store. We just can go in and pray. But yeah, having that mindfulness, that intentionality, that this is what's important to me. Making those things that we know it's halal, we know it's haram, we know we're supposed to be doing, making those things actually be things of priority in our lives. What's your question? She doesn't have to use mic, it's all good. Take your time, you're good. It's hard, I'm not gonna lie. It's not easy. And us big people, we struggle with it too. It's not easy. I think one way of starting is just committing. Putting your mind, I'm gonna do this. I'm going to try everything I can to do it. And when we fall short, we fall short. But we try again. We have belief in God, we believe in Allah, that He's going to forgive us, and we're going to get back on the horse and try again. And also, we believe that we can do it. Believe in ourselves that we have the ability to be whatever we set our minds out to, inshallah, after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's permission. So we understand that it's hard. It's inherently hard in the nature of it. But we just commit, we make the intention to do it, and we struggle. And the first thing that we can start with is being nice to our parents, which is hard. I know. Not only am I a child, I have children. It's both ways. We can start there. Very, very simple. You can commit today and say, I'm never going to say, oof, I'm never going to talk back to my parents again. That is extremely difficult. I was a little bit older than you, and I personally was like, okay, I'm never going to do it again. But with time, things end up becoming habitual. They become a habit. And from that habit, then it becomes something that's second nature. In the beginning, like everything else, playing basketball, whatever you're doing is incredibly difficult. Once you get used to it, then it's a walk in the park. And so I'm sure whether it's riding a bike, swimming, or anything, it was once difficult. We have the same situation. And we have to train ourselves. And so by you starting now is absolutely amazing. That's something that your elder siblings, everyone's going to look up to you for doing it. Because you are going to have a step ahead of them. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for all of us. Then you also have to work together. Make sure that you have companionship. You have people around you that are going to try to help you with that. I remember I was teaching in Saudi one time, and this one young man, he was like 12 at the time. It was break, it was snack, and he was like sitting like way in the corner by himself. You have a question? Go ahead, please. Interrupt me. That's good. Yeah. I would speak to a guidance counselor. I would speak to your teacher. If you don't want to do it, have someone, an adult, talk to them. Will definitely be, especially in Boston, the Boston area, be very accommodating to that. All you need is 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And realistically nowadays, school is from 8 to 2:30, 3 o'clock, something like that. You need one salah, dhuhr. So you speak to your counselor, listen, is there a space that I can pray? Can I use your office for 5 to 10 minutes? You do it at lunchtime, you figure out, you got on your phone, you know what time salah comes in, and you do it. For now, for the end of the winter, if you pray at 12 o'clock every day, you're good. But you pick a time, you just communicate that. And if you don't feel comfortable doing it, you find someone else to. Have someone else advocate on your behalf. If I got to come to your school, I'll come. But yeah, you can do it. You just have to want to. And if you want to, لَا يُغَيْرُ اللَّهُ بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيْرُ مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. Allah says in the Quran, we will not change the status of a people until they change that which in themselves. Which means that someone, as Sadaf always points out to us in our class on Wednesdays, there requires human intervention. It requires us as human beings to first take initiative. Once we do that, Allah will open the doors for us. As He says, if we come to Him walking, He'll come to us running. Subhanahu wa ta'ala. So by you taking that step, doors will open. I promise.
We have a question from the sisters. How do you mentally cope with a situation like having a severely autistic child when the situation is painful to you on a daily basis, especially when the child has a lack of interest in his parents, even after receiving a lot of therapy to help with that?
May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for all parents, and especially parents that are dealing or raising children with special needs. I cannot speak from previous history. I'm not speaking from experience, the word I'm looking for. We did have a halaqa sometime last year where we had a father who spoke and taught us how he was dealing with sons that were both autistic, deaf, and blind, if I'm not mistaken. So again, I'm not speaking from experience. But I do think that this is a gift and a blessing for us. We're having our path, as my teachers say, our path to spirituality is via love and service. And though it's difficult, I can imagine that the love is not reciprocated. There's not the dreams and aspirations that we once had for our children don't look like they're going to be able to materialize. But in that, for us spiritually, there is something for us to attain. By loving them wholeheartedly, by loving them when it's very difficult. Some people could easily push their child into a home. They could send them to some school. Some people could, last time Allah, God forbid, kill children because of these difficult times. So by us loving and continuing to serve, then this is, for us, a means of us growing close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything that I was talking about today was not thinking about another person. It wasn't about, what do I do with obstacles, meaning that you are now in my situation, so how do I fix you? No, how do we deal with us when we're faced with these difficult situations? So when we are tested with these things, one, we have certain maxims in our religion, which I didn't get into for the sake of time. But there are theological maxims, rules that we have to know that are always true. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah will not burden us with something more than we can bear, no matter what we're going through. This is in the Quran. This is Kalamullah. If we remember back what we said about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we know that He speaks. And how He spoke to us was the Quran. And in the Quran, He said He will not burden us with more than we can bear. So, while it may be excruciatingly difficult for us to process certain things that perhaps happen in our life, I accept that. Perhaps we will never be able to understand what is actually for us to take in that. But on a higher level, on a macro level, from the perspective of the divine, on the perspective of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we can handle. A proof that we can handle it is the fact that we're alive and functioning and trying to work through the difficult times right now. It may be difficult. It may feel like this is not for us. It may feel like, and may Allah protect all of us, that going to extreme measures will actually finish the difficult times. No. Allah knows what we can handle. He knows us better than we know ourselves. As the Prophet ﷺ said, that Allah is closer to us than our jugular vein. Allah knows us very, very well. And no matter what He puts in our path, we can handle it. Now, if we believe that, we then have to find a way, how in this difficult time do I worship Allah? How do I get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through this incredibly difficult time? How do I accept this reality that it is and work to grow from it? But we also know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a loving and merciful God. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. He's the most gracious, the most merciful. Ar-Rahman, meaning infinitely merciful. Rahim, wide, infinitely expanding and giving of that mercy. And if we believe that, coupled with the other maxim, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't burden us with more than we can bear, then we know He's not a spiteful God. We know He's not just trying to play some evil trick on us. Excuse me. We know that inherently in this is something for us to take away. We just have to change how we think about this, how we're processing this to be something we can take from. And that's not easy. It requires work. It requires time. It requires dedication. It requires perseverance. It may require seeking help, spiritually or professionally. That's good. It may be to that level. But we still exhaust our means to find a way to cope and to find a way to persevere, to work through the difficult times. We're not looking at things like we're getting better. I've overcome, I've healed from these things. Because the reality is that wounds leave scars. Difficult things leave a residue. It's forever going to be there. But if we embrace them, then they start to then shape how we look at the world. We learn what these wounds are. We learn how we're processing them, how they trigger us. We learn what our own deficiencies are. And then we learn how we can deal with them and grow from them. That requires work. That requires dedication. That requires time. And again, it may require help. But we are trying to do our best to achieve that. Wallahu a'lam. May Allah make it easy for all of us and aid us all. Oh man, we got a bunch of questions. So I'm going to take these last three because the brothers didn't really ask any, and then we'll close inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum. If you could expand a little on how Stoicism correlates to Islam and how you can, what are some specific Stoic philosophies that, correlates with some of the Islamic teachings?
So I'm not an expert on Stoic philosophy. I'm just going to be very, very honest. I love it. I'm a casual enthusiast per se. But the general principles of Stoicism definitely correlate. When we're dealt with something, we just deal with the reality. How does that intertwine with Islam is the fact that we're dealt with something, it's from Allah. Whatever we're faced with, the Stoic way is just say, it is what it is, I'm going to persevere. The spiritual way to do it, it is what it is from Allah. So there's something I can take from it. This is a means for me to get closer to Him. That's the Stoic way, the Islamic way of how we can, deal with the two. And again, if we think about, you can read Marcus Aurelius, you can read Seneca younger or the older, read any of these Stoic philosophers, and just remember Allah at the end of it, and then you've found a way to do it. And as the statement goes that wisdom is the lost treasure of a Muslim. Wherever you find it, take it. If you find something from a Stoic philosopher that does not contradict our theology, that is actually beneficial, take it, use it, apply it. For the last 2 years before graduating, I listened to nothing but Tim Ferriss. His podcasts, I listened to the first 300-400 of them, who is a New Age religionist, who then takes the Stoic philosophy and applies it in a theological way. Ryan Holiday is Tim Ferriss's good homie, I know. But for me as a Muslim, those same principles can then empower and enrich how I look at things, and then open doors for me to say, oh, I can apply this different way now. Wallahu a'lam.
Sorry, because I read Marcus Aurelius and Seneca as well, and in the back of my mind, Islam was always it's right there, and what are some maybe other books do you recommend other than Marcus and Seneca that I can explore further?
In direct correlation with Stoic philosophy, I don't know, but any book on spirituality. So the one that I took the quote from Imam Ghazali, The Alchemy of Happiness, amazing. Anything from Imam Ghazali, generally speaking, it is amazing. But also trying to engage in things that are going to help our orientation around things. So whether it's coming to classes, listening to lectures, wallahi, we have so much time that we usually don't use. Walking to class, driving to work, going to these different things, we can have a podcast on, we can have a lecture on. If you can train your ear to listen to it on 2x, even better. So now you're finishing things that are beneficial, which you may not retain at all. That's fine. Listen to it again. By listening to it, you're passively taking in information. You're washing dishes at home, washing clothes, folding clothes. You have a podcast on. You have a lecture on. The sound is playing, and now you're acquiring information. Maybe just one point in that whole hour is beneficial, but I'm sure you'll get much more out of that than you would listening to music or just thinking about nothing. Wallahu a'lam.
Assalamu alaikum.
Waalaikum.
Quick question. We were talking about how Muslims deal with problems and strife, and how you talked about a lot of how Muslims know everything. But say we are given a friend or a colleague or a classmate who neither believes in Islam nor believes in the Lord, for that matter. How do we explain to them how to deal with problems or any sort of a trouble in their life, despite the fact that they don't have a religion or a God to believe in?
Two things immediately come to mind. The first is that it is not our job to save anyone. We're not trained therapists. We don't have those skills. And so if things are beyond our means, admitting that humbly will be far better for us, one, because we won't harm someone else, and two, because we won't be harmed from it. Perhaps their depression or their anxiety is something that we'll inherit, and then it will affect us in our lives. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, why do we need to, even if they don't believe in the divine, change our philosophies or what we think about Islam? Whether they don't believe in divine, they believe in an ethos of karma, that there's a special function of the world of good and bad. Use that. Take everything from Islam, strip God from it, stick karma on there. Listen, it's going to be all right, man. Karma always works out. Some good is going to come out of everything. As a Muslim, I believe in God, and I know there's some good that's going to come out of this. What you want is going to come back to you. Don't worry. The same thing, and I would even challenge to say that, even if they're atheists, it may be difficult, but I would challenge to say that if they believe in God, then you can use Islam. Strip Islam, take Allah, switch God, you're fine. Take Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, stripped it off, put prophet, prophetic. I've done it. I've given pastoral care and counseling to Christian classmates. And so it's very possible to do. We just have to be a little savvy.
Okay, on the flip side of that, sorry.
No, go ahead.
So on the flip side, you talked about that, but one of the major problems today is depression and anxiety, and we see that from everyone. And it doesn't just have like an economic label stuck to it. It could be people who are very rich have depression.
Absolutely.
How do we as Muslims approach that problem today? And how do we prevent it in our own community, and how do we prevent it from other communities?
That's a halaqa in and of itself. And there are people that are far more experienced and experts in dealing with depression than myself to even go on to that. I think a couple things come to mind. One, just be there for people. If it's not you that's going through it, but your friends are, be there. Be present. Be loving unconditionally. That's it. Don't impose. Don't tell. Bismillah, bismillah. Don't impose. Don't force. Just be there consistently and unconditionally. If it's for us that we're going through it, seek help. I encourage everyone to seek help. Seek professional help. There's nothing wrong with that. We have to break that stigma in our community. If someone is feeling depressed and it's a way that it's now hurting our lives, it's hurting our day-to-day function, then that is when we should then reach out. I can connect you with people if I can't help you. But reach out and so that you can get through that. Allah did not create us to live dark and gloomy lives. Yes, this life is a test. Yes, it's something that plenty of obstacles will be there. But still, with the right internal processing, it becomes blissful. As Sheikh Yasser mentioned in the khutbah today about the man who thought the Prophet ﷺ died in the Battle of Uhud. He said, then we need to go get with him so we could be with him in Jannah. He turned the death of the Prophet ﷺ, what he thought was, into not only a positive thing, I'm going to go be with him, but it earned him high levels of Jannah. And so Allah wants us to be happy in this life, and He wants us to have good lives that are positive and full of joy. So we should definitely seek help. Wallahu a'lam. And one last one.
Can you just repeat the question you asked right after the presentation?
I asked what were some practical things that we can do to, as Muslims, overcome obstacles.
Me personally, I just think about the hereafter, and in terms of obstacles, if I'm faced with something, or I have maybe something bad, or bad intentions, I just think about if I am going to be asked about this on the Day of Judgment. And I just think that's a good way of approaching things. I think, in the Quran, it mentions, in Adam's weight of evil, you will see it. In Adam's weight of good, you'll see it. So I just think about that all the time, in terms of, the small things, good or bad. If I do something, really small that's bad, you immediately have to, repent. Or if you do a small thing that's good, you have to acknowledge that as well.
Absolutely. Jazakallah khair. So with that, we're going to close. Anything that I said that was correct was from Allah and Allah alone. Anything I said was incorrect was from myself and shaitan. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make Him the focus of our lives. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to enrich our lives with the light of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so that we can be merciful, we can be perseverant, we can be God-conscious people that always see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the difficult times and the good times. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make our difficult times easy for us. Give us patience. Give us the perseverance, Ya Allah, because we can't do it without you. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make things easy for us and everyone who may be going through difficult times, now or they will come in the future. And may we always be focused on Allah and Allah alone. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to enrich our lives with a spiritual state that earns us His pleasure. Ya Allah, allow us to die and you are pleased with us. Allow us to die in a state that you are pleased with us. Ya Allah, Ya Kareem, Ya Rahman, Ya Rahim. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi sallam ajma'in.